I welcome the jury and the respected panelists here. And I would prefer to address this particular session without going into reading what I've already written and circulated to all of you here. I am presuming that you will be able to probably go through it or must have gone through it already. The subject or the sensitivity of the subject is such that I am almost tempted to take a cue from Fizza, but not being a poet, I will use a couplet from Ghalib's Diwan to kick the session off. And I think the couplet is very pertinent to the subject of political reforms. पुर हूँ नालों से इतना जैसे राग से बाजा, जरा छेड़िए फिर देखिए क्या होता है. Now, political science has its own idiosyncrasies, and we have to confine ourselves to textbooks when we mention the word politics or political science. But these series of seminars which we are holding are to be able to find an architectural basis of this state, which is an Islamic republic. So, we are in effect probing into the ideological paradigms of an ideological state, the first in contemporary history to have been formulated in 47, and that is what this exercise is all about. When it comes to politics, therefore, we have to see that what does Islam has in store for politicizing. Personally, in my understanding of the whole subject, of whatever little I have understood, there is really no place for politics beyond the defense of the truth. It is the truth and the truth all along that one has to defend, and that is the political basis, the political bedrock, as has been propounded by the dictum. Now, having said that, let's take the relevance of our ideology in comparison to what human history has recorded. We will see that the pre-qualification as a right to rule has come as a consequence of either usurpation, has come as a consequence of subjugation. Colonialism is a form of that particular subjugation, and it has been a history of man inflicting pain on man. Now, when it comes to the question of our ideology by comparison, we have no period in the last 1500 years to take as a model or reflect upon. We simply have the period of the Prophet's life to take as an example. And in his period of time, we can see that the conversion of people into the message of Islam was based essentially on the liberalization of feudalistic laws that existed as a consequence of whatever the tribal norms may have been at that particular point in time. For instance, there were rights given to women, slavery was abolished, protection was offered to the non-believers, and there was, above all, an equitable basis for economics. Now, this equitable basis does not exist today. We have a globe, we have a planet which is fraught with inequities. Whether you take the status of superpowers or you take the status of governance within a country or bilateral relationships between countries, you will come to the conclusion that it is economic strength, it is economic arm twisting which leads to the pre-qualification factors as a right to rule, right to govern, right to trade, and so on and so forth. In the message of Allah, this equity has been overly emphasized upon. This is what we have to reflect upon. And in the last seminar, which was held on economic reforms, I had highlighted in no ambiguous terms the rights each particular person who's born on this planet has towards holding, has towards an equity, has as in stake on the planet where he exists. If we can address the factors of equity, we would have covered a lot of ground and would have arrived at a destination where we could model our own country in a unique way. This modeling, again, has become extremely imperative because we are standing at a crossroad, 6 decades plus, without architectural plans for how the country ought to have laws made out. The philosophy of law has not been adopted. Legislation is based on whims, and there is a whole laundry list of ailments that this country has been inflicted with and is being inflicted with as we speak. It is my thought that should the architectural plans be devised on the basis of our ideology, then and then alone can we have our unique selling point. We can have an individuality on the planet which will enable us to be different from others, and our prosperity, our success will be sought after. Like any consumer product, countries are similarly designed for their architectural plans, and then they are branded, and after they are branded, they are marketed. In the Pakistan case scenario, we don't have architectural plans. We are working against our ideology. Therefore, we are not branded, of course, except by the Western press as terrorists. And we cannot be marketed because we do not meet any criterias or any levels of prosperity. So we are like a rudderless ship which is being looked upon in a variety of ways. I mean, you meet people who enter into instant debates with you, seeking to find out why was this country ever created to begin with? Was it a mistake made? And you also come across debates that why should it remain in the way that it is? Why should it not be dismembered? Now, this is not the fault of the populace which inhibits the territorial limits of Pakistan. It is the fault of the leadership. And the Prophet was very clear in this in one of his hadiths where he mentioned that your big test will come in governance. Post his period of time, we see a variety of methods in which the newly formulated Muslim territory was governed, and we call that the period of the Khulafa Rashidin. And since nobody could formulate in that period of time an articulated template for managing government or for governance, it was swiftly converted into a monarchy, but in the visage of Khilafat. Nothing has changed since. And that is why we also get to hear of debates that if the Islamic message was of any relevance, then we should have adopted it 1500 years ago. The fact of the matter is that we could not adopt it until right now because we had been checked. The evolutionary process had been checked and the application of the message had never taken place. But we are not living in a period of time where communication is difficult. We are not living in a period of time where research and debates are not possible. We are living in a time where it is time enough for us to rise, research, and implement what our message is all about. There is yet another appalling debate which comes to the drawing rooms, and that is religion and politics, and religion or statecraft are two different things. I am in complete agreement with this, but to the extent that the message of Islam has to be excluded from this. The message of Islam is not a mantra of a cult. The message of Islam was never meant to be something confined to singing and dancing and repeating the verses as religions in the past or religions other than Islam usually adopt. I'm saddened to see this thing being injected into the message or into the presentation of the message in our day and age. This is a template of judicial science to be implemented for an equitable social order. Religion, in any case, is a social science, and this is the ultimate message. So when it comes to politics, or when it comes to political reforms, it has to be viewed from the judicial perspective for the philosophy of law, A, and B, for the equity it offers to us in managing a society in an even-handed way. I have made in my paper, which is with you, about 20 rectification measures. I have proposed 20 rectification measures, and these we will run through very quickly so that my allocated time of 20 minutes is not, unless I've already passed that. No, good, thank you. I was having a conversation with my dear friend sitting on the panel, the Air Vice Marshal Abid Rao Sahab, as recently as yesterday evening. And because of his keen interest in history, he reminded me of the establishment of nation states after the First World War in 1906, which was a new form of enslaving and making the global population subservient to a hidden world order, which is now manifest as the New World Order. And that came about as a demise of the empires that did exist. This has since evolved, and we seem to be committed to it. The United Nations Forum, the other global powers, do not wish to look upon any other form of alliance, does not wish to look upon or consider the Islamic point of view that there are two nations on the planet, one that is following the union of Ummah and all others apart. This is something we'll have to do ourselves. This is something we'll have to do in denial of the world order that exists, and we'll have to do it for our survival, for our betterment, for equity on the planet. It is not redundant, in my opinion. It is not based on any romantic thought, and it is not impractical. This is what my paper is all about, and I would be happy to take questions as and when the floor is open to the audience and to the jury and to the other panelists. The 20 recommendations, rectification measures that I have proposed, I'll swiftly run through them, are as follows. In my previous paper on economic reforms, and this is a continuation of the same thesis from the first seminar, I have sought that the political constituencies in Pakistan be confined to urban units, of which about 3,603 do exist in the country. I have sought direct democracy in these urban units so that a parliament can be made up truly representative of the people at the center. I have sought a bicameral form of government, i.e. presenting two houses of parliament, one for legislation and the other comprising of technocrats for the initiation of legislation that ought to be taken place essentially in consonance with our philosophy of lawmaking. I have sought that the partisan divide in the country be cut out from everybody who is selling their different recipes based on sectarianism, parochialism, I don't know, whatever type of isms, and even religion, into a two-party system, because the politics on the planet is based essentially on economics, and the domestic politics is in the visage of the international politics that does exist. Therefore, there is no point wasting national resource, there is no point wasting national time and diluting the energy of a very vibrant population comprising of the youngest labor force on the planet. So we should have essentially a two-party divide, one representing production in the country and the other representing consumption. This divide is essential for debates, for dissent, because it is in dissent that we will arrive at the truth and we can establish the right to rule. I have sought international alliances with all Muslim societies and countries for all facets of economics and military affairs, so that the biggest tool of oppression on the planet, i.e. the printed paper called hard currency, can be dumped to its fate. I have sought a clear divide of the globe for economic vibrance, so that the commonwealth of nature in the use of the Muslim people represents their prosperity and not the prosperity of those who are usurping it. I have also sought the fortification, and this may be irksome to some, of the two-nation theory globally as a demand of Allah more so than a demand from Sir Syed Ahmad Khan or its negation by others. It has a totally different dimension, and the two-nation theory as propounded by the dictum. In fact, Allama Iqbal also supported it in one of his couplets way back in early 1900s. Chino Arab hamara, Hindustan hamara, Muslim hai, hum watan hai, sara jahan hamara. I have sought another very sensitive thing, which is the relevance of social technology or social high-tech being placed above material high-tech. Now this is important because wherever there is going to be material reasons for pre-qualifying to govern or to carry a government forward, it will be filled with injustices and iniquities for the people who are being governed. Therefore, when you view the dictum of Allah, you will see that He has proposed a neutral umpire, and from amongst the people who adjudicate, and He has also sought that social reasons be given preference over any other for the purposes of governance. I have therefore sought an equitable world order in place of the diabolic new world order that exists. I have sought domestic politics be based upon merit and merit alone, executing only the architectural plans of the state which should not be meddled with. It can be essentially referred to as a rigid constitution, if you like. I seek the end of using parliament as a tool for profiteering by various politicians. I have sought the end of a multi-party political environment in the country, as it is not only expensive and it is foolhardy. I have sought to enlarge the footprint of the armed forces to address global reach and access such that they protect both the ideological and territorial frontiers of the state and Muslim societies. I have sought self-reliance as an essential criteria instead of our dependence on any form of aid which comes in attached with strings. I have sought an evolutionary, I have sought ijtihad to be essentially introduced within the structural plans of the state such that the redundant models we have been practicing, following, borrowing, can be shelved and thrown out of the window. I have sought a legislature that will reenact the entire set of our statutes based on our ideological philosophy. And I have finally sought adherence of law to a point of essential tolerance. These, my dear friends, I have proposed by way of measures that ought to be addressed, and I do hope that you will be able to reflect on them and be able to come up with questions so that they can be probed into, and that a judicial process can be commenced whereby we can eventually end up having our own architectural design exclusive to ourselves, duly branded and duly available for being marketed. So, while I will leave you with these remarks, I will read out my last paragraph, which is the concluding paragraph, and will beg leave. I must draw your attention to the glaring reality of our history here in the last 6 decades plus and the 1500 years old history of Islam both. This is fraught with stagnation and consequent regress. We have not applied ourselves to research in social sciences, nor have we heeded to the message of Allah in attempting to manage human society. While all prophets were shepherds at some point in time of their lives learning how to herd flocks, we chose to use the primitive recipe of material might to govern. I implore that we swim out of this daze and redundancy, as this is more than a current requirement. It is incumbent. In the words of the Prophet ﷺ, in governance lies a great test for my ummah. And yet the ummah has ceased to evolve en route through research, finding a universally just course. We have instead resort to monarchies and or recipes handed down to us by alien ideologies, and have therefore settled for decadence and envy, a psyche of destruction labeled as radicalism and terrorism. We are at the bottom of a pit and can only want to be like our slave masters, oppressive, deceptive marauders. Today we are here to provide a fresh wind of change that can be freely debated with tolerance, so that we get out of oblivion and see light, even if it seems like light at the end of a tunnel. With this I rest my case. But before I leave you, gentlemen, I have a little comment to make. In the last 4 seminars, this is the 4th one, I've been observing an uneasy calm here. So a comment towards what has gnawed this audience over the last 3 seminars has been the usefulness and or the redundancy of this exercise we indulge in at this platform of Think. This needs to be responded to. I seek, as an explanation of this exercise, that we will post addressing the basic issues of the state through this thesis, come to a crossroad that will provide a debated and an adjudicated way forward. Once this is done, we as part of the civil society hope to lean on the honorable jury here to carry the recipe to the courts in the country and obtain a declaratory orders putting an end to our remaining rudderlessness. This is of course only an expectation, and we can only wait on the panelists and the jurists in our midst to carry the thought forward. Thank you all.